Let's get started with spatial manipulation. With the power to explore and rival the infinite, realize distance is nothing but an illusion, and control the domain where all matter resides, users of Spatiokinesis can create, distort, and manipulate space. Now, the concept behind this power might not be as straightforward as you think it should be, but to avoid confusion and keep things moving, space is a continuous area or expanse which is free, available, or unoccupied, in which contains the linear dimensions of height, depth, and width, where all things exist and move. Most commonly, when given this power, users can use this ability to teleport, which they can do in numerous ways, no matter if it's deleting space from point A to point B, deleting what's in between those 2 points, simply choosing to occupy a different space, creating portals or wormholes, or they can teleport by making a loophole in space where every action leads them back to their original position. But at higher levels, you'll start to see more creativity and depth with this ability. For example, users could pull space apart or together, which would generate a sort of vacuumized magnetic pull, which causes anything to rush towards what was targeted in the first place. They can also do the opposite, pushing space, which is essentially the expansion of space in a certain area to, like I said before, push away objects. Depending on how strong the spatial push force is, or whatever you want to call it, it can act like an unstoppable cannon that launches pure spatial matter, whatever that is. Now, I know you guys have been waiting for this for a while, and to be honest with you, I was kind of scared to do this power because, oftentimes, when I look out into the infinite expanse, it makes me wonder, what's out there? What do they want? Are they looking back at me? But anyway, I decided to give this power a whirl. Better late than never. But before I tackle this power, I need to warn you guys yet again that the information in this video is ever expanding and, well, pretty vast. So I'm going to try my shayest to condense it and keep this video bearable. But while I work on that, I'm going to need you guys to do me a favor. And that's to hit that like and subscribe button. I made sure to put them as close as possible for you guys, so the distance shouldn't be a problem. But if it's still too far for you or you just don't feel like reaching it, then do me a favor and at least hit that share button. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people who want to know more about this power. There's plenty of reason to. So if you guys are ready to rip a hole in space, then skip ahead to the video and, well, don't skip it. Well, let's just do it. Okay, the history of space, if you want to call it that, I guess. It really isn't that hard to pin down because, in fact, all you really have to do is look up. For starters, we have the boundary of the known universe where all solar objects, planetary bodies, and star systems are created, exist, and then die. Simply called outer space, or if you want to get a little bit more technical, space-time. And if you believe the super smart among us, which you probably should, then it might have a border, but it's ever expanding and its systems can be expressed in mathematical and numerical values. But that's not all. No. It can exist in the physical and in the abstract. And lastly, it closely correlates with time, almost as if they were one and the same. But more on that later. But it doesn't stop there because this is just a brief scientific, or ironically enough, grounded view of the concept of space. This power has existed in legends of myth and mythology in numerous forms, and I'm really not joking either. This ranges from beings that are personifications of concrete things like the boundless sky or the endless darkness or the volume of the ocean, even an expansive landmass, or those that represent abstract things such as distance in learning or a specific language barrier, if you will. But you'll more than likely find liminal deities, which are beings that exist on the border of something, whether it be thresholds to other worlds, gates to eternal paradises, or doorways to secluded dimensions, fitting within this mold. In fact, most deities or wielders of divinity within their respective pantheons, you name them, they have dozens of them, have space manipulating feats like teleporting, spatial sense, or separate dimension creation as a prerequisite. Well, they would if they wanted to be respected and feared. Okay. That was just a brief summary of the possible origins of this power. I had to keep it short to keep this video moving. But once again, let's get the simple stuff out the way. Yes, this ability is insanely overpowered and will always be considered a top tier ability. Yes, given any important character, this power can cause them to break the story that they're currently in, so you'll have to give it built-in limitations. And yes, this ability will always share a very, very intimate relationship with time or temporal-based abilities. The funny thing about spatial powers are that they seem way more complicated than they really are, just like the concept of space itself. But ironically enough, most things about this concept can be broken down or explained, and the explanation that you get can and will translate to how this power can and will operate normally. Yes, nerd and nerdettes, I'm talking about math. Yeah, math. Well, in all actuality, and more specifically, numbers. And one of the main categories of math that can be used is, well, geometry. In some cases, this field of math can be classified as the study of spatial sense via equations. Remember that. It's not going to be important or anything, just remember that. For example, to figure out how much space an object can hold, a formula for calculating volume is usually introduced. Well, what if you want to figure out direction within a set space? Then angular or degree-based equations are your go-to. In addition to all that, space is usually given a boundary or some kind of limit that makes it easier to perceive and calculate the distance that exists within it. And as you guessed, yes, there are equations for this too. Numerous, in fact. And last but certainly not least, space as we know it exists in 3 dimensions, with those being length, height, and depth. Although there are reasons to believe that there are more that exist that we just can't perceive, but that's a topic for another video. So simply put, no matter what kind of space we conceive of, whether it be physical like the actual space between matter, or abstract like an individual's personal space, or something like that, we associate the very concept of space with an innate domain of a sort. So, symbolically, that's what it really represents, a reality or some kind of boundary, or even a domain, if you will, which can be both endless and or infinite. That's why if you slap any word or term in front of the word space, it creates a whole new term with new depth and some weird esoteric meaning if you look into it hard enough. An example being headspace. We all know that the head is actual physical space, with things that occupy it as well, but the term refers to a person's mental state, something that's usually subjective and not really measurable. But an individual's belief that it really exists gives that said subjective concept an actual, recognizable existence, if you will. So just imagine this very same concept in our real world, but as a superpower. Yeah, that's why I said overpowered earlier. But getting back into this concept as a superpower, the power itself really can't exist on its own. And by that I mean that space in itself can't really do anything. It just exists. If you're really manipulating space, odds are you're just manipulating everything in said space. So this power is just basically another name for telekinesis, like other powers like gravity manipulation and or air manipulation, or even darkness manipulation. Links for those are in the description. In fact, this power relates to those I mentioned earlier, as when this power is normally used, one of the main ways it's portrayed is by showing air being pushed or moved around, or gravity being interfered with, showing a shadowy or dark areas with dimensional properties. Users with this power can use this ability offensively by either erasing or rupturing space, which can obliterate anything that's contained within that space as well. If the user's control of space is precise enough, they can selectively tear off limbs and or vital organs from their opponents by manipulating and then separating the space that body part occupies. By pulling and folding space around an object, users can prevent it from moving or crush it. But not only that, users can also use this ability defensively by, erasing space in front or around themselves to create a vacuum which nothing can enter. Otherwise, the user can achieve the same effect by infinitely dividing the space between themselves and the opponent, making it impossible for the aggressor to reach the space manipulator, which effectively creates an impenetrable shield around the user. Advanced users could also move objects as if they were telekinetic by controlling the gravity through space, which also can be used to enhance their own physical capabilities such as strength and or speed. Users would be capable of creating subspaces that could trap or store objects or be used as powerful projectiles through the conversion of space. They can also use this ability to levitate in the air, and at a ultimate level, users would be able to manipulate space in a very complex way, such as making a room appear bigger on the inside than it is on the outside, or creating a never-ending corridor that just repeats itself over and over. Even worse, they could create distortions that affect things at a universal level, which warps the landscape, creating non-Euclidean environments. But it doesn't stop there, because they would also be able to manipulate other forms of esoteric space that has properties completely different from spatial matter as we know it in the real world, like mental space or even cyberspace, which essentially allows them to achieve godhood status. Stats for a user of this power range widely, but we can normally narrow it down to say medium to high levels of attack power, medium to high levels of defense, and medium to high levels of speed, and immense versatility. Common colors associated with space or spatial phenomena really run the gauntlet, so anything from blue to black or white or even purple works. Aesthetically speaking, they'll wear things that remind you of outer space or, of black void background with stars and some kind of empty space, or I don't know. You can get creative with this. It's normally common to show spatial effects bending or warping localized space, via giving straight surfaces, unnatural curves and angles, or even weird dips in places you wouldn't expect, aka creating non-Euclidean geometry. That's what that meant before. This effect is normally portrayed to show the power of the spatial manipulator and or to show the otherworldliness that their presence creates. But it doesn't stop there, because it's also pretty common to portray the space manipulator imagining the area he's about to use his powers on with some kind of grid-like overlay, where each square, line, and or point on said grid can be referred to in coordinates, numbers, aka math. Or if you want to make it even easier, I guess, showing a user of this power creating a specialized domain within a limited border is definitely a way to go, where a user has complete and total control over everything within that border. So to complement that list of abilities, users are normally portrayed as highly intelligent, or at least have an extremely rational way of looking at the world. I mean, that's kind of where the math part of this comes into play. But anyway, if we're being honest here, without the conceptual knowledge, one really can't use this ability to its absolute limits. Like, you would have to be smart in order to maximize this ability. So expect users of this ability to be portrayed as arrogant and apathetic at their worst. But on the other end of the extreme moral scale, they could be portrayed as clingy or controlling or friendly, but still apathetic, even at their best, because with this level of power comes a level of perspective where you don't really look at people as individuals anymore. But in order to still make a character like this come off as being charming, they usually portray the character to be airheaded or aloof in some type of way. But even air has its limits, just like this video, unfortunately. So that's where we'll be ending part 1 of this power. Yeah, I know, just when it was getting pretty good. So stay tuned for part 2 as we get into the applications, uses, and uses for this power. Remember to like and subscribe. And if you don't want to wait, then consider joining my channel membership, where you can watch all the entire power breakdowns unedited and uncopyrighted, with all the examples and clips that had to be edited out for only $5.99 a month. So join up and stay ahead of the shay. And I'll see you in the next one, nerd and nerdettes. Deuces.